The average American family spends approximately 38 minutes preparing and cooking dinner. Sometimes our schedule allows for that and more, but that's not always the case, and I'm sure it's not for many of you either. Today I'm going to share 4 scratch meals that will save you time and still have everyone begging for more. The first quick meal that I have to share with you today is a new take on an old classic. I'm going to share with you our version of sourdough discard pizza. This is a recipe that I pull out when I need something quick and full of flavor, but I don't have the time to make our full crust. I also often use this when I have some sourdough discard that I need to get rid of, or if it's just time to feed my starter and I'm not interested in making any bread. So all that I do is pour that starter straight into a screaming hot cast iron skillet. And as you can see over there on the right, that one that I started with is already set up very, very nicely. Now I do make sure that the pans are nicely oiled and preheated to 450 degrees. Before I add the starter, I did give it a nice little layer of tallow to make sure that they easily come out at the end of the cooking process. I went ahead and par baked these for about 4 minutes on 450 just to make sure that the crust had a little more crunch to it before I added all of our toppings. Here I'm adding pesto that I made from our garden last summer. I absolutely cannot wait to have fresh pesto again, although the frozen does do really, really well. It's still not quite the same as the fresh, so I'm looking forward to that coming out of our garden here soon. But all you have to do is spread it out over the bottom and then add toppings on top. For me, this is going to involve some leftover chicken that I pulled off some chicken backs, actually is what I was using. I was making chicken stock, and when the bones were done, I went ahead and pulled all of the meat off in order to have kind of a quick meal prep ready to go. So onto that, I'm adding some sun-dried tomatoes, some frozen onions, feta cheese, and then I'm going to top with a little bit of balsamic vinegar before just adding a touch of mozzarella to the top to make it melt really, really nicely. Now for me, that's kind of my favorite, but my kids, they like barbecue. So I'm adding a little bit of our favorite barbecue sauce here, just doing the same thing, smearing it around in the bottom. And I will also mention their pizza is a little bit bigger because I'm actually using a bigger cast iron for that. That comes in really handy for the necessity of feeding more people, but it does make getting the pizza a little bit more difficult out of the pan, and I'll show you a little bit more on that later. So they are just getting the chicken, same chicken that I've already meal prepped, the frozen onions, and the frozen cheese that I already pre-shredded with you last week, was it? I think it was last week when I went through and shredded up all my cheese. So back into the oven, these get 4 more minutes. And if they don't have quite as much browning as I want right on top, I just turn them under the broiler for a minute or 2 until they're done. Now you do have to watch the edges of the crust that are standing up a little bit taller, because if you leave them under the broiler too long, they will definitely show it right up there on the top. Now, as you can see, they just pop right out of the pan, super easy, and then you just have to cut them up and serve. These are a quick grab and go bite, and they have a great crispy cracker thin crust. So definitely consider this one if you're looking for something quick and easy and already have a sourdough starter going at home. And if not, it's really easy to make. Now, as we got this all finished up and I was cleaning up the kitchen, my very favorite little egg collector came in with our fancy egg apron on, which I actually picked up from the sponsor of today's video, which is Temu. Now, I must admit, I have been very hesitant to try shopping with them for quite some time, but after talking with several friends, I'm super glad I did. I got these cool little trays, one that I keep on my bathroom counter with my facial stuff, as well as this one that I keep here beside my stove, the apron that I showed you before, and that's where I got all of these awesome spice jars to finally change out my spices to a matching set. And I could not be more happy with how this simple little thing changed my entire kitchen. And speaking of changes, tell me I'm not the only one who has a drawer full of utensils that look just like this. Well, when I had the chance to grab a few things from Temu to give them a try, I decided it was time to take this under control and go ahead and get some of these really cool spring-loaded drawer organizers to change my mess into something that is so useful and made a huge difference in our kitchen. Now, Temu also happens to be the place where I got that awesome new stainless steel cutting board that I've been using for the past several weeks to make my bread and chop all my veggies, and you'll see it more a little bit later. I also replaced a bunch of my wooden spoons and finished purging out the plastic that I've had in my kitchen for a long time, which I really, really appreciate. I'll show you more on those in just a bit. I will tell you though, I did pick up a dress and the sizing is just a little bit different when you're coming from United States sizes into their system. So I wasn't really thrilled with that, but I was super happy with the quality. Check out these beautiful wooden spoons and that wooden spatula on the top. It flips over my food so good. I was super impressed with these and will continue to use them for quite some time. Now, if you are new to Temu and interested in checking them out, make sure to download the Temu app. And if you're a new app user, you can get a $100 coupon bundle by searching my code, which is DVP2597. And I will put that down in the description for you. The code is valid with my link for 24 hours from the time you claim it. So make sure to check out all of those details down below and check out some new kitchen gear that you can pick up from Temu. The prices were much less than I could get the exact same products from a local United States supplier. So for me, cutting out the middleman meant I could get a few more things on my wish list than just the normal 1 or 2 items at a time. With that, I want to thank my friends at Temu for sponsoring today's video and jump back into the next meal, which is one that went over super well as well. I'm making barbecue chicken sliders. Now, if you are not new to my channel, those buns might have looked familiar. A couple weeks ago, I showed you my bread routine where at the same time as I make a couple loaves of bread for my family, I also make hamburger and hot dog buns in order to have them in the freezer for as needed times. Well, this is one of those days. I pulled out the chicken that I had from making that stock a couple days ago, threw in some barbecue sauce, and put them on the buns that I thawed out from the freezer. Now, of course, you can get fancy here. You can add some cheeses, different flavors of cheese, whatever you want. But for me, I just pulled out a bunch of the frozen cheddar cheese, threw it down, and then topped them with onion. Now, once that was complete, I popped them in the oven, warmed them up. It took maybe 10 to 12 minutes to get them to the temperature that I liked, and that was it. Instead of even making a side dish to go with this, I served them with some of our favorite Cool Ranch chips. My favorite is the Late July brand that I usually pick up from Azure or Thrive Market. Had we not been in such a hurry, I probably would have picked a different side because we're not normally big on having chips with meals. That said, on this specific day, we had a lot going on. We are in the process of getting my new garden set up, so I had so much work going on outside and we didn't have time to sit down and have a meal. I actually ended up taking these outside, served the guys, and then came back in to put the meal away before jumping out there to help them as well. I can tell you the flavor of these buns with the barbecue sauce, it was really, really good. They weren't super sweet, like as sweet as a Hawaiian roll, but they did have a lot of sweetness to them. And I think that was just the compliment of the barbecue sauce. But as you can see here, here's a little picture of the project we had going on outside. It's a lot, friends. It's a lot. Those buds are going to be awesome. I can't wait for the spring season. But for now, we're going to jump back inside and I'm going to show you one that you might not think of as being like super kid friendly, but my kids love roasted cabbage. So what we're doing here is taking a whole head of cabbage. I chopped it up really fine. I've got some onions going here that I'm going to throw in as well, and some sausage. Now, this is just a beef sausage. You can use kielbasa for this or whatever your favorite is. But the 3 of these items are going to go together to make a delicious skillet that the whole family will absolutely love if they're anything like mine. Now for this, since I am making so much, I get my huge cast iron out. I think this one is 17 inches. I want to say, I'll go measure it, make sure to link the right one, but it is huge and heavy, but I need that when the family's as big as mine and we're making all these meals at the same time. Now to go with it, I'm spooning out some of that chicken broth from the stock that I was making earlier, and I'm throwing that in the rice as my cooking liquid. Of course, you can cook it with just rice, but I find that the flavor of the rice is so much better when I actually use a stock to make it. Now, this meal comes together and the amount of time it takes to cook that rice. If you don't want to do it on the stovetop and you can do it in a quicker way, you're still going to be ready in the same amount of time. All of the work that it takes to chop it up is just the max time here. Now, once I got these in the pan, I got them good and set. And then my husband called me outside to take a look at the garden again. So as you can see, they got a little bit done on one side, but we really like the flavor that that char brings into the meal. So it was perfect for what we were looking for. But I did want to point that out. You might want to go a little bit less, but I had to go outside and approve of a design layout dilemma. So once that was done, I came back inside, pulled those out of the pan, and went ahead and got those onions sauteed. To the onions, I'm adding a little bit of garlic. Most typically, I use a fresh garlic that I go ahead and mince up on my own. But because I am in the middle of so many big projects right now and time is of the essence, I love having some fallback garlic to go ahead and pull out in times like that. I know I should go ahead and preserve some of my own in a way that can make it that easy for me. And maybe I will this year because I have a really big garlic patch, but I have yet to have that much garlic. So for now, I buy those little jars about once a year probably and just use it as needed. Once it's gone, I'm usually back in the mood to kind of use my fresh, but just do whatever works best for your family. Now, once you get it all added in, you really just want to flip it over and saute that down until the cabbage gets really soft and delicious. And at that point, you're ready to go. Now, this might take a while, and depending on the size of the pan, it can be kind of hard to find a lid. As you notice here, mine being extra huge, I decided to go ahead and bring that cutting board back, use it right on top of my cast iron to go ahead and give myself a nice seal and get the cabbage really sauteed down a little bit faster. Now, I mentioned earlier this spatula that I'm using right now when I was talking to you about Temu, and I want to tell you I was really amazed with it and how easy it actually scraped on the side of this pan. It was like oddly perfectly contoured to get everything clean right off of it and didn't have any weird angles to it. So I am a huge fan of that one, and I will definitely be having that in my hand more than I would like to admit. It's probably my new favorite kitchen utensil, which, considering I've gone through several, is kind of saying something. Now, instead of eating this right away, I went ahead and made this earlier in the day so I was free in the evening to help out more with what was going on outside. So I threw this in the Instapot, just put it on keep warm, and then as we were moving through the day, when anybody got hungry, they were available to come inside and make this happen. I really love any meal that is going to give me the flexibility to prep and plan early and then just use it as needed. So once I got the cabbage and the onions in the Instapot, I added it together, gave it a really good stir, and then added a splash of apple cider vinegar just to give it a little bit of a tang. You also want to adjust seasonings, adding salt and pepper as needed. So if that is something you want to avoid, being the vinegar that is, you can definitely do that. For my family, they actually asked for it to be a little more tangy. My husband mentioned possibly adding in some sauerkraut. So just kind of taste it, flavor it, and make it your own. But I will tell you the overall flavor of this was really great. We had some leftovers and were able to eat it a second day. As for the rice, we had enough of it left over that I was able to recreate it into a fifth additional meal that we actually ate on the night that I'm recording this. We turned that into fried rice. So that's the reason I always love making so much extra when I'm doing rice, because I can turn it into a second meal. Fried rice is way better when you're using cold rice to actually cook it. So I find that's a really good hint that helps me out when I'm in a pinch. And I was able to throw that fried rice together in maybe 12 minutes. For it, I use frozen vegetables and more of that leftover chicken that I pulled off the chicken back. So things like that really do come together when you have just a few basics ready to go. Now, the next meal is my last loaf of bread that I actually had in the house this week. So tomorrow is going to be another bread making day, but we ended up turning it into an all-time classic that gets requested on repeat around here, which is tomato soup and grilled cheese. Using our freshly milled wheat bread, it had a really delicious flavor. And then I'm just using my old trusty block of cheese here and shaving off as much as we need for the sandwiches. Now, I always have a hard time estimating how much cheese I actually need, and you'll see that a little bit later. My kids absolutely love grilled cheese, and they like to be able to pull it apart and really get the stringy texture to it. So I kind of ended up loading these up with a little more cheese than I needed. Now, if you are a grilled cheese maker and haven't ever tried to use mayo instead of butter, I want to highly encourage you to give it a try. I find that it really makes the bread crisp up really nicely. It adds a nice texture. It doesn't really change flavoring that much, but it does give a really nice crunch and a nice sear to the outside of that sandwich. Now, into the pan, I am throwing in a bunch of butter, some onions, and then allowing them to saute down. Now, this takes maybe 5 to 7 minutes to really get this going. So in the meantime, it's a good time to go ahead and start preheating your griddle for your grilled cheese. I waited just a little bit longer because I wanted the soup at a more complete state before I did that. But if I was truly in a pinch for time, I would have done these both at the same time in order to conserve a little bit of that extra time. Now, once the butter and the onions were together, I threw in a little bit of flour to go ahead and start a roux, and then poured in some milk. Now, I will say this was something I should have tempered a little bit more. It didn't turn out to be the very best grilled cheese we've ever had. Most typically, I use a little bit of a different recipe and don't go for one that's creamy, but I wanted to try something a little bit different this time. I will say absolutely nobody complained. It just was not my personal favorite tomato soup I've ever made, so I'm not going to leave you that recipe, but any other recipes that I've actually used, I will go ahead and put those for you down below. Now into the milk, I'm adding a little bit of thyme. There was some baking soda, and this recipe called for brown sugar. Typically, I will use just a little bit of plain white sugar, but this called it for a tablespoon of brown before going ahead and adding in the tomato sauce. Now, I actually do not go ahead and make a finished product of a canned tomato soup here at my house. I usually try to leave it as tomato sauce because then I have the versatility to turn it into several different things throughout the season. But I have considered going ahead and putting that tomato soup on the shelf just to save me a little bit of the extra time at points like this when I just needed to go a little bit faster. But since versatility is something that I am really interested in around here, we'll see how that goes over time. Now my griddle is hot and my grilled cheese are down. This griddle is not made for my stove, but it just lives here because I use it so much. So it does have a spot right in the middle where the burners don't actually get it as warm as out on the sides. So as you'll notice here, once I load these grilled cheese up, the two that are closest to both ends will finish a little bit faster, and I really have to watch them to make sure that they don't get overdone. And then that last one will stay on there just a little bit longer to make sure it gets to the same doneness. So now that I've shared with you 4 of my quick and easy go-tos anytime the kids are hungry, if you have any others that I didn't cover, make sure to leave them down below because I am always looking for new things to try out here in the kitchen. I want to take just a minute to remind you that you have 24 hours from the time you set up your Temu app to go ahead and take advantage of that $100 coupon bundle by searching the code with the link down in the description. That is going to wrap it for me today, but I want to go ahead and invite you back next week when I do another big batch freezer meal prep day. So I'll see you back soon.